And that's true about everything in life, right? So lifting weights is so much more than the physical development that it is like the psychological and the mental side of it. I really do believe it's the best thing you can do as a baseball athlete is to become strong for the physical perspective, but also for, what it does to your mindset.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Scott Haase, and this is ITTV episode 14. We've got Kyle Boddy with Driveline Baseball and Cincinnati Reds with us today. I'm going to go real quick. We're going to keep it to a half hour today. I know we're going to crush a bunch of information here and content, so I'm going to go over just some of the normal to-dos. So if you guys want to follow us on social media, it's just at Indiana Twins across the board, youtube.com/Indiana Twins. We're uploading all these videos, putting timestamps in them so you guys can kind of skip around to the content that you want to see, but that'll be there on YouTube. If you have any questions, email us indianatwins@gmail.com, and that'll probably be me responding to those questions. I do want to give a shout out to one of our sponsors to our organization. We currently aren't having any games right now at our fields, so to have a sign out there with no viewers, I want to give a little bit of shout out to those good sponsors. So we've got L. Thorne Company in Mooresville, Indiana, so thanks to you guys. And then before we get into a little bit of Kyle's background, I just want to kind of do a little bit of an overview. So Okay, so what we're going to talk about is, like I said, a little bit about Kyle. We're going to go into a little bit of research, training, and then we'll cap it off with our normal Twins critique. So if you guys do have questions, I'll try to get to those in either Instagram or Facebook. I've got those both up, so let me know, and we'll get into it. Kyle, I appreciate you coming on. I want to kind of just get right into it. So I want to hear I've heard it a bunch of times. I guess I kind of want everyone else to hear it too, but what made you get into coaching?
I moved to Seattle when I was 23, and I just was interested in filling up some of the hours, honestly. Like, what am I going to do when I moved to Seattle? I had no friends, and I had no friends there at the time, and was looking forward to just, doing something different and wanted to coach baseball. I always loved baseball, but then I was like, you know what? I'm going to try to give this coaching thing a shot. And so then I started coaching at the Northeast Seattle Little League. I remember did the draft and everything for the juniors, 13 and 14-year-old division.
Were you the head coach for the team?
I was, yeah. There were 5 of us, 5 teams. Yeah, it's unfortunate to talk about, honestly, because the Little League, we had 5 teams, and I remember we were talking about, do we want to have 6 teams or do we want to have 5, because we had so many kids. So it was 18 kids per team at 5. Do we want to cut that down and go to 6? But then, there were summer vacations, and we're like, we eventually just said, we'll go 5 teams. We'll play a few extra games so we can get all the kids that fair playing time. And today, there might be 2 teams of 13 in that same league now, and it really is tough to see that the Little League participation is going down, nationwide, in 10 years.
Yeah, it's gone pretty quick. I know that's actually where I got my start as well. I was not a head coach, so I didn't get to be a part of the draft, but I know that's always an interesting time. I know you've talked about in your past with, you got injured when you played. One of your motivations for coaching and starting Driveline and all that was you had gotten injured. You didn't want other guys to get injured. Can you talk a little bit more in detail about that experience with getting injured? Like, what happened and how much did it weigh on you, and how much of that really was the driving force?
Yeah, it was just constant shoulder injuries. It was never very specific, though. Looking back and getting some diagnoses from doctors as I've gotten older, it's pretty clear I have a labrum tear. I constantly aggravate it at least once a year. I just can't get my arm overhead. I either sleep on it wrong, throw too much batting practice, pitch too much, and I can't even get my elbow above my shoulder in that position. So it's a pretty guaranteed labrum tear. There are at least two tears, like subscapularis tear for sure. So it's just general stuff. When you're in your mid-30s and you've been throwing a ball for long enough, or playing tennis, which was my number one sport, you just end up, having issues. So that's the problem. The problem also is when I was younger, I threw a lot through year round. I threw hard when I was young, and then never got a specific, diagnosis or whatever was wrong. Never, fortunately, have had very, very, very limited, I won't say no, but very limited problems with my elbow, which is, pretty lucky. But it's all been shoulder issues. And so that was really nagging, because I could never get a specific answer. And that's really the genesis of driveline baseball is there were never specific answers, right? Well, bench press is bad, don't do pull-ups, or, do bench press, or do bands, or don't do bands, or take time off throwing. It was never specific, and nothing I did helped. I could never get a clear answer, and that's still the case in a lot of places with baseball. We've come a long way with shoulder injuries, in the last 20 years. They're basically, the shoulder injuries we used to see 20 years ago, they don't really happen in baseball anymore, which is great. But there's still just a long way to go in general. So that's really what started a lot of driveline.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, I had heard a few times that you'd played tennis, and then just kind of prepping for the interview and everything, I was reminded of that. What made you really because I know you played ball in college, but you didn't try to go seek out tennis. What happened there? Was it baseball was kind of an afterthought, or?
Yeah, it was really, I played tennis in college. I hit with my roommates. My roommate played on the college tennis team. So we would hit regularly. Like I would hit with him, since still had a pretty big serve at the time, still could say my serve velocity way better on a relative sense than my pitching velocity. So they always wanted to hit with someone who had a pretty big serve for practice returns. So I hit all the time with him. It just was a fatigue issue. I couldn't play a 2-3 hour match. My shoulder would just be too painful. But in short spurts, it wasn't a problem. Whereas throwing a ball was always painful. There's something to be said about why that is. The weight of the racket and the mechanics of tennis are a little bit different. So that's I think a big part of it. The baseball stuff really flamed out pretty fast in college. I focused much more on academics because I realized it wasn't going to be a thing. And then of course the humorous thing about the whole thing now is that I go back and I'm really close with the head coach of Baldwin Wallace, which is where I went to school. Different head coach, Fish was there, which the field was named after him now. I was the coach when I was there, and now it's Harry now. So Brian Harrison, and he's killing it. He's doing a great job there. Beautiful field, and we support the program. So it's been awesome to go back and give some talks to the college and hang out. It's been really cool.
What would you tell young Kyle back then, playing tennis, overhead sport, baseball, throwing all year round, nagging shoulder issues? What would you tell him to do? Where would you tell him to go?
Yeah, there just wasn't anywhere to go at the time, So honestly, you've given him the advice, or just be man, it was surrounded with a lot of really good information, to be honest. The high school that I was at was into lifting for all the sports. I played soccer as well, and we lifted on the soccer team, which was pretty rare. And we played tennis, and we were encouraged to lift and do tons of stuff. So it's not like the advice was bad. It was just probably would have taken more time off, would have actually understood that you're not indestructible. But you tell any 14-year-old that, they don't necessarily believe you, And so I think it's just it's not a failure of coaching. It's just one of those things where the game's evolved, and I just got caught up in a time when we didn't have specific information. So it's hard to look back. Relatives of mine have been like, "Oh, wouldn't it have been awesome if you had this information 20 years ago?" Sure, but no one did. So it's no one's fault. It is what it is.
Yeah. So fast forward to after college, I did some digging because I originally found you in the forums, old school forums that I saw even as of last year. You're still contributing to those in some fashion. So whether it's Let's Talk Pitching or Baseball Fever, there's a ton of them. So I went back there and scouring through those. It was kind of like a trip down memory lane. So it's kind of cool. And to see, 23-year-old Kyle Boddy in there posting, I'm trying to get back into pitching. Here's some things. So to see your progression and what you're trying to work through was really cool. I know one of your goals was to get up to 80 to 82. Did you ever reach that goal?
Yeah, I saw that in the pre-show notes. The unfortunate thing is I did. So it's but where this is going is a bummer. So there was a year I found Starting Strength by Mark Ripito, really focused on lifting. The next year I had the best year ever hitting. I also spent a ton of time on hitting mechanics and so forth, but the increased strength, my squat going from 135 to 450, and deadlift going over to 500 pounds at 200 weight, was only 220, 230 at the time. I was all of a sudden just had much more power. Fastball velocity was a little up, not really, but I just felt better generally. And so I was like, man, there might be something to this. And then that next year, it must have been a 16-week program, throwing weighted baseballs 3 times a week, throwing a ton, still maintaining my strength. I was pulling down close to 90. I was hitting 80 off the mound multiple times in this shack. And it was like, I was like, then I pitched in a bunch of scrimmages in the men's league team. And they're like, holy shit, this guy throws hard. I was probably sitting upper 70s pretty regularly. And then I got in a ridiculous car accident, which I've talked about a million times. I was on the on-ramp or to get off-ramp to get to my house in Seattle, and the traffic was backed up all the way to the highway. I was at a standstill, and someone hit me going 65 miles an hour, rear-ended me, just straight up. Herniated discs, L4, L5, S1. And the silver lining in this is that we met our manual therapist through this, that he fixed my back, and then we hired him at Driveline. But I remember I went out, I'm like, yeah, I think I can manage this. Rotation really hurt, but I'm like, if I eat enough Advil, I'd probably get through it. And then I went out to a game, I remember, and it was so debilitatingly painful. I laid down on the ground, and I'm like, I can't, I was in the dugout, laying on my back. It hurt so bad. I reached out my hand, and I'm like, hey, can you help me up? And as the guy went to grab my hand, I'm like, this is really bad. I should have two hands out, And then he grabbed me, pulled me up, my back rotated, and it was 10 out of 10 pain, so bad. And I just didn't play that year. And then ever since, my back's been pretty bad. So it's been pretty frustrating. I threw I threw a short box to the Reds hitters. I was touching 74, I think. So, it's might be in there, but yeah, my back is in a pretty bad shape ever since.
I've suffered not from I don't know where mine came from, but I've had back pain since I was 15. So I can't imagine from a car accident and then knowing what your spine, that's. Oof.
Yeah, it sucked. I feel walking was pretty painful, and it comes and goes, every so often. I think anyone who has chronic back pain understands that you have these periods of months where it's totally fine. You're I'm good. You can squat, you can deadlift, you can move around in the weight room, no problem. And then there's just months where it's nope, I can't. I can barely even get out of bed. And so it's just something you manage, at this point. But realistically, now compared to where it was, it's a heck of a lot better.
Yeah. So I know a lot of this, and when you're trying to improve and all that stuff, you had gotten a journal subscription, you started looking into research. I'm not sure what your background in research was before kind of diving into it, but I think this is an important thing to at least briefly discuss, if nothing else, because it's something I have conversation with people that I talk to in my full-time job with the hospital, in a bunch of different areas, but just learning about not only what is the details of research, but about how research is done. Can you talk a little bit about how, there's a lot of correlational studies, what that is, how some things are biased, and all kind of the ins and outs, or maybe politics, I guess, about that?
Yeah, when I started looking at the research journals, the studies are primarily carried out pretty well. There's very, very little, when I was very little invalid research when I was looking into it. The biggest problem was that the populations were not even close to what we would see. You're not looking at elite college athletes, pro athletes. And the studies that were done on college athletes were probably by mostly Dr. Gupta-Ren at the University of Hawaii. He actually worked with the Hawaii baseball team, so he got guys that were throwing 85 off the mound. It's it's pretty reasonable. But there was just no studies with pros outside of ASMI. But then you look at their data, and it's the average velocity is 82. No one's trying. Meanwhile, fast forward a decade or two later, and we have guys like Tucker Davidson, who has 49 markers all over his body. He's wearing sliders and a hat. Everyone's cheering. He's in 100. Wearing in a biomechanics lab. It's unheard of to collect that kind of data. So to start with the end is always where I thought about it. I try to think about that in everything. So that was where it was I know that we need to collect that kind of data. It doesn't exist. So how are we going to do it? And that's been the genesis of R&D at Driveline for over 10 years now. And so the big things are some of the studies that have come out over the last 5 years are very, unfortunately, politically motivated, where it's the person has something to prove, that has a hypothesis. Because the person has a big name, they're much more likely to get a study accepted. And so it's very frustrating to see some of the studies that come out that are, pretty nonsensical. So, but you also have to imagine, and Dr. Fleissig told me this a while ago, which is a good point, whereas ASMI is the American Sports Medicine Institute. It's not about performance. It's about medicine. It's about the M, right? It's about medicine and healing and rehab. So the things that get funded are rehabilitation, injury things, not necessarily performance studies. So that's been the dichotomy over the last 5 years, and Driveline. We haven't published a study in a year, which is kind of a bummer, but we do have a bunch in the pipeline that are done and submitting to journals, which will be pretty interesting, I think.
No, I mean those, just eating those things up, the ones that you guys have posted. It's awesome because not only is it free and you don't have to go through a subscription or pay money or try to find it some other way online, but then you can look at how the entire study was done and all that. I mean, how did it motivate you with all those factors, and how do you guys kind of navigate that in-house with also the understanding that it might only be a small data set and this might not bring us to some conclusive and this is the answer, but how do you manage that?
Yeah, it's almost like you just want to give the people what they want. For a long time, it's just your critics are always going to move the goalposts. So it is what it is. You can't really live off that. But, it's just like, well, you can't get people to throw harder. And, you demonstrate you can get them throwing harder. Well, that doesn't translate to the mound. You show that it translates to the mound. Well, it's going to hurt them. You show them that there's really no difference between this and that. And they just constantly keep moving the goalposts. But while you're not doing it to, shut up the haters, what you're doing unwittingly, what we were doing was showing that we could collect data in a structured, formal way that was informative. And then in doing so, that attracted the attention of big league teams, because the medical directors of the teams, the general managers were like, look, this is not some dude on the internet just posting biased stuff. Like, he really understands how to collect data and have unbiased research. So it ended up being our biggest marketing arm that we have, is just showing that we can do this kind of work and we understand it as well as anyone else. So that's kind of how we ended up staying on the same path.
Yeah. So I sent you an email. This is probably 2014. I was asking about when do you put this in a program and when do you place this and when you do this. And your response to me was, quote, pretty much the last thing we do is throw weighted baseballs, because that was part of my question too. And you guys do a ton. It's not just pitching, it's performance, it's R&D, it's hitting, it's all kinds of things. Can you talk about, from just kind of a building the athlete standpoint, what other things you guys are focusing on and why those are important?
Yeah, it's the high performance side is incredibly important. The strength side, whether it's with the Reds or Driveline, and fortunately, this has been a thing that has not been hard to get athletes to buy into. 10, 20 years ago, this was much harder to get them to lift weights, but now I think pretty much everyone realizes that you have to do that. So by the time that we're getting athletes at Driveline and the Reds, we're getting older athletes, whether it's college or pro. It's like they have. There's the expectation that they need to be in the weight room, so you don't have to fight with them on that. So that's easy. So now it's about not redirecting their energy, but it's like, I need to get in the weight room. This is what I want to do. And it's like, hey, let's have a conversation. Let's make sure we take data-driven initiatives, so that's force plates, that's, velocity-based training. That's a ton of stuff, because not only do I think it yields a better result, and it really has a Driveline, but kids are driven, in a video game culture. I'm not trying to throw kids under the bus. I'm not, right. But they play video games. And so part of their brain is used to the gamification of things. So if you give them numbers to tackle, goals to tackle, things that resemble, scores and so forth, they're much more prone to do it, and be more active and resonate with it. And so fortunately, the data-driven kind of revolution really ties into what they already feel. And so that's been really valuable, especially in the weight room, because the ultimate number is the weight going up, your 40 time going down, your force plate, data going up, vertical jump, broad jump, whatever markers you want to use, has been incredibly important. The opportunity is that, it's harder sometimes to get parents to understand that it's some of the most important thing a 12-year-old can do is continue to love baseball year in, year out, which means not burning them out. And so then the second most important thing to do is movement quality and learning to lift heavy weights. I've been on record of saying there's just a subset of the population that will never squat 315, because at some point, if you really care about strength development, like you have to, it's like when you unrack the amount of weight or go to pick up weight, you're like, this is an insane amount of weight. This is dumb. Like this is like, and you have to get over that mental hurdle to do that. But then that's true about everything in life, right? So lifting weights is so much more than the physical development that it is like the psychological and the mental side of it. I really do believe it's the best thing you can do as a baseball athlete is to become strong for the physical perspective, but also for, what it does to your mindset.
Yeah. What do you say to guys that, because we've got a handful of them in our organization that, they want to go down that route, but they don't have a program because it's a small school or they're not sure where to go? What would you tell them to do to kind of get started in the weightlifting?
Yeah, the best books are, by Mark Ripito, because it's clear, it's easily understandable, and he's very funny. So if that's your kind of humor, it's extremely funny. And it's very easy to understand, and it's very simple to do. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 3x5 this, 3x5 this, chin ups to failure. And are those the best exercises? Whatever, probably not. But you know what? It's like a very consistent routine to do, and it gets you through the novice strength development phase. And and you have the internet now, so you can do those lifts. You take video of it, you post it on the Starting Strength forums, and you're going to get feedback. And that's what I did. So that was the best way. And then as you get stronger, you'll probably want to seek out a coach or something, which is what I did. I sought out a powerlifting coach and went from there.
Oh, that's awesome. I can't speak highly enough about getting onto forums. It's a whole new world on the internet that a lot of people maybe don't delve into, but it's awesome. Let me see. I'm gonna check real quick to see if we got any questions. Get out of there. This is good because we just I had my buddy on who's with the Rays organization about mental performance. What's your opinion or what's your thoughts on mental training and breathing?
It's incredibly important. The problem, not the problem with it, but the side of it is, like, who do you go to trust for that information? Because there's a lot of people who post. There's a lot of motivational speakers and mindset people, just an infinite number of them, because they make claims that are not falsifiable. So the number one tenet of science is if you can't state something that's falsifiable, then it's not scientific. You have to be able to say something that can be proven wrong. And the problem with a lot of the mindset stuff is that runs very counter to the Eastern philosophy, or the non-specificity. So for me, I don't really endorse a ton of people that don't have a structured program around it. But there's no denying that having some sort of structured program, whether it's meditation, which has been very helpful in my career, in my life, to breathing exercises, to the ability to control the game, is extremely important. But to me, it's got to be a structured thing. It's just how my brain works. It's also how baseball works. It's a very structured game, right? So having a routine is extremely important, and that's part of the mental side of it. So for me, I think it's very important. It's just, to me, it's important to also have a program that you buy into, that you can repeat regularly, and it's another piece of the puzzle for me. But it's definitely important.
Yep, no, I completely agree. I'm curious. This next question has to do with your employees at Driveline, and then also I'm thinking now with the Reds and in the limited time, it was still probably a handful of months, but what have you learned from your coworkers with the Reds, your coworkers and your employees at Driveline? You've got almost 60 of them now. What have you learned from them, whether it's work ethic or just things that they've kind of brought out of you or, challenged you that can translate for baseball players?
A lot of it is, whether it's on the high performance side or the pitching side, whether it's removing drills or I'm pretty open-minded. I've fired myself from multiple jobs at Driveline. I used to be the director of pitching. I guess I still am, but the day-to-day operations are Bill Haase runs pretty much everything. I used to be the director of R&D. Joe Marsh is now that. So for me, what I'm it's not necessarily open-minded. I am, but that's such a cliche thing to say these days. The thing is a lot of people say they're open-minded, but they're not willing to fire themselves from positions of authority. So that doesn't really mean anything. The fact that you're willing to listen to alternative sources of information doesn't matter if you always need to be the one in control, right? Which happens a lot. I've said it a million times. There's a ton of baseball businesses out there that I see failing because the person gets some early momentum. They're doing well, and then they just don't trust their employees. They don't trust outside sources. They have to be in control of everything, and then it all falls apart. Whereas I've divested. I used to be the CEO, sole founder of the company. I brought on Mike Rathwell. He's now the CEO. Like, well, how could you give up being the CEO? It's like, because the company is going to grow, you got to give up some responsibility. Multiple times, Matt Daniels, Bill Haase Sam Breen have instituted programs or going counter to what I think makes sense. Or just like I'm objectively looking at it. I don't think it's a good idea, and Driveline is going to do it because I got to let them do their job. And some of the time it fails, like I expect, and some of the times I'm wrong. But the company is much bigger than me. Like I say, one day I'm going to step away from the company, from the day-to-day operations entirely, and I'll just be around as kind of a mascot or whatever. And guys are going to come in and train, and they're never going to have heard of who Kyle Boddy is. That's the goal, is that, we hire an employee or athletes come in and train, and they have no idea who I am. And that means that then I'll have done my job. And so then it's easy to say, but very hard to live, that you need to be able to give up control for growth. And if you don't, then it doesn't matter how open-minded you are. You got to be willing to let your employees make decisions for you.
There's a ton of good insight in there, and that actually leads into our Twins critique. So I'll preface it first, and then we'll kind of get back into that. But the Twins critique, it's just a section or a segment in here that I've added just to kind of ask the experts. So we're always trying to be open-minded and always evolving and growing. So it's a chance for us to talk a little bit about what we do as an organization and then just get some feedback. So the two main things with the Indiana Twins for our tribal organizations from 8U all the way up through high school, and then we've got our college guys come back, is number one, we all speak the same language. So we've got an in-house coaches certification that we just finalized and went all the way through it this year. So all of our staff, all of our coaches and instructors all speak the same language. We're all teaching the same things. And then the other big thing is it's kind of all in-house. It's all in one roof. So whether it's catching, pitching, hitting, mental training, infield, outfield, we've got all of that in a 20-week off-season program, and it's all included in your fees. So with all of that said, and I prepped you a little bit, Kyle, going kind of back into the business side of things, what would you add as a critique? What's something that we need to focus a lot more on or could tweak? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, the number one thing is the integration component, is getting everyone on the same page, like you said. And we've done that at Driveline. The whole certification thing we didn't make that to make money. We made it because we were losing employees left and right. 30 employees have left Driveline to work in professional baseball. So if you don't have good education, good on-ramping, then you're not going to be successful. And we recognize that early. Although not as early as we should have, to be completely honest. It was a pretty big failing for us. We only really got our hands around it over the last year. And so it's hard to get right, we thought we had it and then we didn't, and you constantly find areas that you screw up. So it's this critique is not, I'm critiquing Driveline for some reason at this point, but it's just my advice and the critique, I guess, of the program is it's not going to be perfect, and you're not going to get it right in your first time, because you're going to have this in-house certification, this in-house development program you think that covers everything. Come June, if we had a normal season, mid-June, there's going to be like, man, I didn't think about that. I didn't think about this part of logistics, and now the 8U team is doing this, the 12U team is doing this, and man, you just add it to the list, and then the next year it gets better, right? And that's what's happened Driveline. And with the Reds, it was a big reason I chose the Reds, because I just got a Slack message a couple days ago from our director of physical therapy, who's it's been great to work with, and he's like, hey, we want a 2-page document. What's really going to change with the throwing program? We have been on the same page, but now it's more like, all right, how is it with the new draftees and the new guys coming in? How are we going to do it? And then let's get on a Zoom call and go through, basically a certification. So I developed an in-house training program with the Reds, and we had 4 quizzes, including biomechanics, so on and so forth. So it's definitely the way to go. You have to spend a ton of time and a ton of resources on in-house development. But the caution I would have for you and the critique is that it's going to seem like you're doing a ton of work. It's going to seem like, this is the right direction. And my guess is that you'll find out you have to do actually twice the amount of work that you thought you did, because that's what's happened with us.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that feedback. And this is kind of the part of the show where it seems like an infomercial, but I've only brought on people that I just either have a really good relationship with or highly respect, or like in Kyle's situation with Driveline, we use a lot of their products as well. So every book that Kyle's put out or his team's put out, we bought, whether it's the overload, underload baseballs, the command trainer baseballs, the plyo balls, Driveline's track program online for our teams. Like, we use a lot of their product suite and just believe in what they're doing as an entire company. And I was just a big fan. So with all that said, if people are interested in any of those things, where can they go and where can they find you, Kyle?
Yeah, drivelinebaseball.com is still the best place, whether it's the free blog, the newsletter, so forth. Track is free right now for individuals and for facilities on a trial basis, just because of the what's going on right now with COVID-19. Being able to get that in the hands, we feel really, really confident in our track products from Little League all the way up to the professional ranks. We spent a ton of time, ton of money on it. It's it's our primary way of how we do things, both in-house and remote training at Driveline. So I encourage everyone to check it out. It's definitely been huge.
Yeah, I'd highly recommend it. It's fantastic and it's always growing. And other thing too, just real quick, is customer service from Driveline Baseball is incredible. It's pretty much world class, and I know that was a big goal of yours and Mike's. So kudos on that. Anything else that you want to add real quick before we end it?
No, I think we covered it. Thank you.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, Kyle. And then for you guys that are going to tune in on Friday as well, we've got Randy Sullivan coming on, same place, same time at 8:30. So thank you to everyone, and hopefully we'll see you Friday.